Good afternoon. This is our last video presentation and our last week, 4:30 here in Cincinnati, and we're going to discuss the three bonus chapters. Chapters A, which is, as you can see here, working within the legal environment. Then we will go to bonus chapter C, managing risk, and finally bonus chapter D, personal finance. Some of this material we have covered a little bit previously, and hopefully it will be interesting to you. It will take us a little over an hour to get through the three chapters, and I would like to remind you that there is no reflection paper due for the bonus chapters. So let's get into this and look at this. Look at our learning objectives. Define business law, distinguish between statutory, common law, and explain the role of administrative agencies. Define tort law and explain the role of product liability. Identify the purposes and conditions of patents, copyrights, and trademarks. Describe warranties and negotiable instruments as covered in the Uniform Commercial Code. List the conditions necessary to make a legally enforceable contract and describe the possible consequences if such a contract is violated. Summarize several laws that regulate competition and protect consumers in the United States. Explain the role of tax laws in generating income for the government and as a method of discouraging or encouraging certain behaviors among taxpayers. Distinguish among the various types of bankruptcy as outlined by the Bankruptcy Code, and then finally explain the role of deregulation as a tool to encourage competition. All right. Well, why do we need laws? Well, laws, as the slide says, or you can see the bullet here, is needed to maintain civilized society. Law, however, changes with the times. It's not static. Yes, we use precedent. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But I say we, being I'm speaking here on behalf of the judiciary, even though I'm not a judiciary person. So the judiciary is one of the three branches of government that we have in the United States: administrative, judicial, and legislative. And we have a court system that's divided into federal and state courts, and then each state, or most every state, I should say, has other courts beneath the state system: county, city, etc. Now we have different types of courts that hear various cases. Most trial courts hear what's known as criminal law and also civil law. And then we have appellate courts that hear appeals. Our appellate courts in some states, appellate courts you can find appellate courts at certain districts, usually tend to be within counties. Other states' appellate courts are only held at the state capital. And of course, in the United States federal system, we have district courts, then we have appellate courts, and then we have the Supreme Court. We have several different types of law. Criminal law is something that we use to bring people to bear for torts that they have committed against other people. And remember that the court is the last piece of the judicial system. The judicial system has investigative forces for the police, prosecuting attorneys, also investigative forces. Then we have things called the grand jury in major cases, which will decide whether the case should go forward or not. And the criminal courts are set up to hear trials about people who have committed criminal wrongs. Civil courts, on the other hand, are not criminal. They are things like divorce, personal injury, and cases of that matter. Now, there is a big difference between juries, and I want to point this out to you, that sit for criminal law and those that sit for civil law. In criminal law, a defendant must be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That does not exist in civil law. That's a little bit different. The procedures for evidence are not as strict. Now, business law is a little bit different here because we're not talking here about going to court, but business law incorporates a number of regulations and rules, etc., that provide what is known here, and look at the word is used, a legal framework in which businesses operate. And then here we have several other things that you need to know about statutory law and common law and precedent. Statutory law are laws on the books, I hate to use that word again, that have been enacted by a legislative body of some kind. Now, in some statutory law, if you want to go there, only belongs to certain parts of the federal government, such as treaties and things of that nature. Common law is a little bit different than, or it's a lot different, I guess is a better way to put it, than statutory law, because this is law that has come down to us by courts. Notice the term there, it is unwritten. Unwritten means that you will not find it in legislation. United States Congress, state legislatures, and various city and county governments, or if you're in Louisiana, parish governments, have not enacted a specific type of law, so you won't find that. Precedent are decisions that have been handed down by the legal folks, here being the judiciary, and they are used, these precedents are used as a guide for a particular judge or a panel of judges, depending upon where you're sitting and what type of trial is being conducted, to guide them in rendering their decision. And a lot of our law comes from English common law as precedent, and we continue with that for a period. Now, someone is going to ask, and rightfully so, why is it that we have so much embedded in English common law? It's because the English people were the major settlers of the United States, the major white settlers of the United States. And from them derived most of the law, because they were familiar with British law, or English law as you prefer, and that's how our laws came to be. We can argue with that, but it's kind of a moot point, because we're not going to change those laws unless we find them to be onerous in some way, or in some way prejudicial, or other things. Now, even though they are not considered part of the judiciary, we have administrative agencies. These agencies are empowered by a legislature to act on their behalf. And now, why is that important? Well, we only have the United States. Let's talk about the United States government. We only have 535 elected representatives, 100 senators, 435 representatives. So it would be very difficult for each one of those individuals, or as a body, to investigate various things that people bring up that have to be done. And the legislature, in this case the Congress of the United States, what I'm talking about, has given authority to these folks to make decisions. And here are some examples of administrative agencies. One of the agencies that is not mentioned here is the Internal Revenue Service. And I bring that up because we like to complain about the Internal Revenue Service, because it is the tax collector. Nobody likes tax collectors. and yet that agency brings in more money than it spends on a regular basis. And you have to remember that the Congress of the United States is the one that writes tax laws. All the IRS is doing is enforcing what Congress has told them to do. So the next time you want to get mad at the IRS, you ought to be mad at if the anger is justified with your representative or senator. This particular slide just gives us an idea of some more federal agencies. You can see this depicted in your text figure A.1 on page A4. I'm not going to go through that with you. It's something that you can read at your leisure, but it gives you what type of agency it is, federal, state, and local, and then what kind of rules and regulations it enforces. Now, I spoke about this before. I mentioned the word tort, T-O-R-T. Now, if you're thinking of something you eat, which is a sweet, that's T-O-R-T-E, tort. A tort is, as it mentions there on the slide, a wrongful act that causes harm or injury to another person's body or property and or reputation. And we see some of that going on today in the 2016 election. Some people are complaining that their reputation is being ruined. Now, an intentional tort is exactly what it says. That means that you or I, if we are brought before a court of justice, have actually tried to and gone out of our way to harm someone. And that harm results in some type of injury. Negligence is different. It is something that is unintentional. We didn't really mean to do this, but by our own not paying attention, it happened. And you can still be held accountable for that. Then within these laws, we have things that affect each and every one of us on a routine basis. Now, I stay away from every day, and I stay away from frequent, and only use the word routine because it does happen on a routine basis, not maybe to us individually, but perhaps to people we know or people we've heard of or read about, etc. And these are things called liability, product liability, and we have strict liability. Product liability holds a business to account, if you will, for any harm that comes to a consumer who has used this business's product because they were not warned about it. Now, we have the famous case, it goes back a few years now, of the woman who was severely scalded when she opened a cup of very hot coffee that she bought from a local McDonald's. And that way we have little warnings, I shouldn't say little, warnings on top of these things that the contents may be hot or cause damage, etc. So that was product liability. In other words, this woman, who happened to be an elderly woman, well, I'm going to change that to over 60, felt like she should have been warned that coffee was going to be excessively hot. Other people have argued she should have known better. Well, the fact of the matter is, we ought to tell people that what you're buying is hot. Everybody does not always know that. It's a styrofoam cup. The heat doesn't always come through real well, or the cold, depending upon what you're talking about here. And so we ought to do that, and the cost is minimal. So then we go from product liability to strict product liability. And here, the company can be held liable for a defective product even if they didn't know about the defect. So this is strict. And it's really something we really have to pay attention to. For harm or injury caused by a product regardless of fault, that's what it says in the text. A little bit differently here than what it says on the slide, but it's the same message. So that's a thing that we really have to pay attention to. So then we look at major liability product cases. And this is listed in your text on page A6, figure A2. And it shows some that we know here. The Ford Motor Company with the Pinto goes back to 1978. Pardon me, Jack in the Box with E. coli issues back in 1993. Sara Lee I didn't know about. General Motors in 1999. Tobacco firms in 2004. Now, let's look at the tobacco firms in 2004. The tobacco firms actually knew about this problem with nicotine and other chemicals that were in tobacco, mostly in cigarettes, not to say they weren't in other ones. But this is an issue, and they hid this for a long period of time. So that goes back to product liability, but it could go back to strict product liability if, in fact, they said, well, we really didn't know that that existed. And let's kind of go back there and see what it says. And it says, legal responsibility for harm or injury caused by a product regardless of fault. So to my way of thinking, the tobacco companies probably were into product liability, but it is possible we could have put them in the strict liability avenue if you wish. Now, the next thing we want to cover are things called patents and copyrights. Now, remember, we talked a little bit about copyright and brand when we were in the marketing pages, but we didn't really talk about a patent. A patent is something that is issued by the federal government, and it protects the business who earns the patent for 20 years. They have the right to be the sole manufacturer or distributor of that particular product. And then after 20 years, that patent goes away. Now, years ago, patents used to be renewable one time. And as I remember, they were good for 17 years and then renewable for another 17. That's gone away, and we haven't had that for a period of time. Copyright, a little bit something we talked about, is kind of like a trademark, but not quite the same. This is the protection, for the most part, of intellectual property. Here we're talking about people who are songwriters, who are writers, who are movie producers. They may produce cartoons, etc., as the slide says, and artists. Now, if you're talking about an author, his or her work cannot be used without permission, usually 50 or 100 words, more than 50 or 100 words, depending upon how it's set up, cannot be used without permission from the author, the author's publisher, or the author's heirs or estate, assuming that the author is no longer around. So if you're going to use that, you have to get permission. And then a trademark, which we have talked about before back in the marketing chapters, is a protected name. It can be a symbol, it can be a logo that identifies goods with a particular company. Now, I'm not going to go over this slide very much with you a whole lot, except to tell you that if you have an idea that you believe can earn a patent, it is best to seek out a person who is familiar with patent law. I'm talking about a lawyer. I know I'm talking about something that is not inexpensive, but you want to get somebody who understands the patent law and can help you with the process, or help you understand the process. A regular attorney is not a person that you want to contact unless you're contacting that person and asking him or her to give you a referral to a patent attorney. Both of my daughters are lawyers, and I would not ask either one of them to represent me in a patent case, simply because that's not their forte. They're not, sufficiently into patent law. Certainly not trying to denigrate my daughters. I'm just using them as an example. We have another slide here that talks about different companies and patent leaders in the United States. And notice that you do not have to be a United States company to get a patent in the United States, nor do you have to be a citizen of the United States to get a patent in the United States. The next item we're going to talk about here is what's known as the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. Notice that it covers sales laws and other commercial laws, and it's applicable in all the 50 states with the exception of Louisiana. Louisiana still follows the Napoleonic Code. UCC has 11 articles, and it has a wide range of business issues that it covers. For more information on the UCC, I suggest that you look at, go to Google or another search engine and type in UCC. It will give you a lot of other information. We don't really need to go into that right now, but it's something you may want to find out on your own. Warranties are covered under the UCC and are talked about. And what the warranty says is, the manufacturer says to the consumer, I am selling you this good or goods for the purpose that I say it's intended to be used for. And if you want to sue me, you have to use it for that intended purpose. If you use it for some other purpose, then you can't sue me because you're using it for something and I said it's not to be used for. So there are two kinds of warranties. There's an express warranty and an implied warranty. The express warranty, it makes a specific representation. It tells you exactly what it is. And it doesn't say anything different than that. The implied warranty is much different. Guarantees concerning products legally imposed upon the seller. So what it says here is a government, if you will, has imposed this implied warranty on the seller because the seller says the product is going to do what I say it's going to do according to certain standards. Even though the manufacturer didn't actually say that. By selling that good, he or she implies that. The next thing we come to are negotiable instruments. Now, I want to remind you that a negotiable instrument does not have to be something that is a contract that is drawn up by a lawyer. We normally think of it that way, but it doesn't have to be drawn up by a lawyer. Notice that these things are transferable between businesses and between individuals. 4 conditions have to be there to make it a valid negotiable instrument. It must be written and signed by the person who is the maker of the instrument. It must be payable on demand at a specified date, and it has to be payable to the bearer. So what that says is if I bear the if I'm bearing this instrument, then it has to be made payable to me. I'm the bearer. So that leads us to what is known as contract law. Contract law is an agreement that between two parties and is legally enforceable. The contract law, the contract law specifies what constitutes legality, and that it's an enforceable agreement. And breach of that contract says simply that one person has not held up his or her end of the bargain and is in what we would call default, and therefore is liable. Now, here are the requirements for a legally binding contract. All right, and this is going to follow what we talked about before. Not follow, but you can see how that melds in with what's known as a negotiable instrument. Somebody makes an offer. Somebody else accepts that offer on a voluntary basis. In other words, no one coerces that person to agree to the offer. Both parties give consideration. Now, consideration here, we talk about either something like a trade or money changing hands. And this would be, I offer you, I'm going to make an offer to you to buy this ham from me. And maybe I don't have the ham right here with me, but I'm going to have it for you as long as you pay me X dollars. Both people are competent. That means that they are able to make that deal on their own. Nobody has to help them make that deal. And a big piece here, and this is very important to remember and to keep, is that it covers a legal act. So if you are trying to sell contraband, for instance, and you enter into a contract with somebody to buy this contraband, it's not a legal contract and it's not binding. And then finally, the contract's in proper form. Pretty simple here. And you can see this spelled out very explicitly on page A9. And notice down here in this thing, an agreement for the sale of goods worth $500 or more must be in writing. So what this is telling you is you can enter into what's known as an oral contract. And as long as everybody agrees and there's some offer and the offer is accepted and everybody's competent, etc., it's going to be legal. Now, we talked about breach of contract. And a contract is breached because somebody did not hold up his or her end of the bargain. It could happen because of specific performance wasn't done. In other words, I said I was going to sell you a ham and then ham didn't show up, or I sold you something that was less than that. And there could be payment of damages, and there could be a discharge of the obligation. So those are all things that can happen to a person if he or she breaches the contract. Now we talk here about the Clayton Act of 1914. This is getting into the area of antitrust legislation. We don't see a lot of this today. We do have some of it, but not as much as we used to have. I don't know whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. But what it does is it prohibits, the Clayton Act prohibits exclusive dealing, the tying of contracts together, and interlocking directories. Now, from that Clayton Act, we had antitrust legislation. We had the establishment of the Federal Trade Commission, 1914. Notice that it prohibits unfair practices in business. The Wheeler-Lee Amendment of 1938 gave the FTC additional control over false and misleading advertising. And then the Robinson-Patman Act 2 years earlier, 1936, prohibits price discrimination, and that applies to both buyers and sellers. Large antitrust cases in the United States. You can see this in figure A3 at the bottom of page A11, and starts with a Standard Oil antitrust case that goes back to 1911, and the most recent one of United States versus Microsoft in 2000. Consumerism, as the text points out, is a social movement. And what it's trying to do here is strengthen the rights of buyers as opposed to sellers. I want to stay away from the old caveat emptor, buyer beware slogan that was around for many, many, many years. Then we've had some consumer protection coming in with the Dodd-Frank Act following the meltdown, the financial meltdown 2008. And then it also created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, by the way, I take a little bit of a side here. Someone, I don't remember who it was, sued as saying that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau had too much power. I'm sorry, I'm right there. The consumer, I don't remember, it's a consumer watchdog agency. And anyway, said it had too much power to levy fines, etc. And a judge agreed, federal judge agreed, and said that there needed to be oversight. Now, does that mean that that federal agency is going to go away? No, it doesn't. What it means is that there'll be more federal oversight put into that, and somebody won't continue to bring that up for a period of time. Taxes are the way the government pays its bills, the collection of taxes. And says how it raises money. Well, yes, it raises money in that respect, but it also uses the money it raises to pay bills. And it just lists here some of the forms of taxes that we pay in the United States. And I'm not going to go over that, nor am I going to go over the next slide that talks about sin taxes, which says here's what people pay, nor on whether or not the rich pay income tax or not. The fact of the matter is that they do pay. Whether they pay enough is enough in percentage is another issue, which I don't intend to get into because that causes a lot of angst among various and sundry people. Bankruptcy, this is the way businesses and individuals go to court and ask for some type of forgiveness for their financial obligations. Now, that doesn't mean they don't pay, but they're asking for some forgiveness so they can step back and figure out how it is that they are going to be able to pay their bills back. Chapter 7, straight bankruptcy, that's filed by individuals like us. Chapter 11 is reorganization. That's only done by businesses. And in Chapter 13 is a repayment plan, again, done by businesses. This is the order in which claims are paid in bankruptcy cases. I'm not going to go into this with you. It is listed in your text at the top of page A16. But there are some things that have to be taken into consideration here. And they're paid. Notice these are unsecured claims. Notice that the top bullet says creditors with secured claims receive their collateral or repossess the asset. So they have first priority. It is the folks who have unsecured claims, not backed by anything, that are going to go in the pecking order than when it's shown. Notice wages, salaries, and commissions come in the middle. And then federal and state taxes come at the end. People getting their money back for products that they bought but were not delivered is what is down at the bottom of the list, almost the last thing. So those are things that we have to think about. And that is Chapter 7 bankruptcy. That's straight bankruptcy. That is nothing other than that. And this last slide gives you some idea of how, by the way, if you will look down here, the assets are divided in bankruptcy. It gives you a little bit of a graphic down at the bottom that supports what you have up at the top. And this last gives you an idea of regulations for hamburgers. It's one of those gee whiz slides that I don't like to spend a lot of pay a lot of attention to, or spend a lot of time on, and therefore I think that you can read that at your leisure, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. That brings us to the end of bonus chapter A. It's 5:05. We'll take a break to 5:08, and we'll come back and begin bonus chapter C, which is managing risk. Thank you. Please come back at 5:08. All right, 5:08, we're back, managing risk. Let's look at our learning objectives. Identify the environmental changes that make risk management important. Explain the 4 ways of managing risk and distinguish between insurable and uninsurable risk. Define insurance policies and explain the large numbers and the rule of indemnity. And finally, discuss the various types of insurance businesses can buy to manage risk. Now, I want you to, as we go through this chapter, to please keep in mind that each of us faces risk on a daily basis. Now, we don't think about that. It's not something that comes to our mind, but we do face risk. If we own a home or are buying a home, we have a risk of fire, and we have a risk of water damage or damage from other natural elements. We have other things we have to be concerned about. And the same is true with our children going to school, with us driving to work, all sorts of things. So we do have risk that is around for a lot of us. And we don't always think about that because it's not something that comes to mind on a everyday basis, nor is it something that we even want to think about. So we have this term we're bringing to you today that you may not have seen before, and that is enterprise. Well, excuse me, I'm in the wrong. let me go, but I don't like the way these slides are set up. And I'm going to skip slide and look about risk, and then we're going to come back to what we had there before. Risk is simply, as we're defining it here, is the chance of loss. It can be considered as a probability of loss, and in financial terms, how much it's going to cost us. A speculative risk, if we're thinking about it, is a chance of either making money or losing money. A pure risk, on the other hand, is the fact that we're going to lose money and there is no chance of profit whatsoever. Now let's return to the previous slide that I had up before, and I'm going to bring in a term to you that may be foreign. You may have heard of it before, but I would suggest that most people, unless they're running a business or the management of a business, have heard of it, and that is Enterprise Risk Management, ERM. What this says is if a firm has some risk, it's going to decide whether the risk that it has identified is something it can manage, what type of risk management it should have, if our technologies that needed, do we need to invest money to do things that we're managing the risk properly, and then how this risk management for this particular item or series of items will affect everything else, all the operations within an organization. This says firm, that's fine, but certainly I want to explain that. We normally think of firm as being something that's in business to make a profit. If I use the term organization, that spreads it to the nonprofit sector. If I use institution, that proves it to the nonprofit sector and to government. So we want to try to cover all of those bases. So one of the things we talked about, now remember, let's go back and look at this term, this pure risk. So then we want to move down there. How do we manage? And that's the term I'm using. The slide says it a little bit different. How do we deal with pure risk? And it gives you four ways to try to do this, if you will. First of all is to reduce the risk. So what this is saying is that you reduce the risk or take it down enough so that it becomes manageable. So if it becomes manageable, then it probably is no longer pure risk. It probably is still in a category that's not speculative, but it doesn't quite amount to pure risk. Now, I may be wrong, but that's kind of how I see it. Okay, so one is to reduce the risk. The other one is to avoid it. So that's saying it, if I don't do this, then that risk will not be around. So if my behavior or my operations, cause us to be in this potential risk category, let's cease doing that, and we will no longer be thought of to be in that category. Self-insure against the risk. That means what I'm going to do if I own this business, or if it's a publicly traded business, in other words, we're selling shares of the stock market, we're going to talk to management, board of directors is going to talk to management and say, we want you to set aside a certain amount of dollars in case this risk occurs so that we can ameliorate it by paying off. And so in other words, we're taking something out of our pre-tax dollars to say, we're going to have to pay tax on it, by the way. Now you can do the other way. You can take it out of post-tax dollars too, but then you're going to hurt the bottom line of the company. So you probably want to take it out of pre-tax dollars and say this is going to be an operating expense, which we may or may not have to use. but we're going to show this as a potential operating expense. Now, whether or not you can show that as a deduction, I don't know. I would think you can't, but you can set aside funds to do certain things. So it's something, if you decide you want to do, you want to talk to both the lawyer and the tax accountant. The fourth is say, hey, wait a minute, we're better off buying insurance against that risk. That's what we do when we buy homeowners insurance, or we buy renters insurance, or we buy automobile insurance. Of course, most states you have to buy automobile insurance or some other type of insurance. So we're saying that we know there's a risk. We know that every day when we get on the road to drive to and from work, or we for pleasure, or we're taking our children to school, or whatever it happens to be, there is a risk. And we don't want to self-insure against that risk, so we're going to buy insurance of some variety that if that risk occurs, the risk of having an accident, if that occurs, somebody else is going to pay that bill. Well, if somebody else isn't actually, you're paying part of it, and the rule of numbers is helping you pay the rest of it. So that's what we do, and we deal with that on a regular basis. So I mean, many of us have. I can't say I fall into this category, but many of us have bought insurance forever, car insurance almost. I've never had an accident. My wife would fall into that category since the time we met and have been together since we got married. That's a long period of time. She did say she had an accident when she was in high school. Don't think it amounted to much, but so she's been paying, and then we've jointly been paying insurance for automobile insurance for a great number of years, and we've never had a claim for anything that she did. And we might have had a claim where somebody damaged her car, but not anything that my wife did. This particular slide just talks about notable disasters. Hurricane Katrina's in there, and a few other things in there. We don't know what it's going to cost us for this hurricane that we just hit the southeastern United States. It's going to be rather severe. I have every reason to believe that's right. Well, what self-insurance is simply what it says. And we talked about before. We're going to set aside funds. Now, again, this is a firm. So don't think of this as buying insurance. Okay, because when you buy insurance, that's not self-insurance. You're not setting aside funds to pay for a claim, a potential claim, a claim that may never happen. You're not putting those funds aside. Now, if you do have insurance and you have a deductible and you have a minor automobile accident, and a minor automobile accident costs, repair is going to cost you $495, and your deductible is $500, you're going to have to pay for that. But you still haven't self-insured. Okay, you didn't set that $495 aside. Notice what companies can do. They can go bare. They roll the dice. Hey, you know, I don't think it's going to happen. And so, since I don't think it's going to happen, I'm just going to pay this as a normal way of doing business. That's what that comes out of operating funds. I'm not going in and setting up a separate fund to pay for risk. I'm saying I'm going to roll the dice again, as I said before. I don't think this is going to happen. And if it does happen, I'll just pay it out of what I have. I'm not going to set anything aside. What is that, good, bad, indifferent? I don't know. You really have to decide for yourself whether that's a good policy. Now, what risks are not insurable? Market risk. That simply means if you get in the stock market or the bond market or some other type of market that trades securities and that market tanks, you can't get money back. You can't recover it. That same thing is with political risk. Now, we don't have that in this country, or we haven't had it in this country, at least in modern times, and I don't think we've actually had it any other time since we've had the Constitution that we operate under today. Other countries do have it. And then we have personal risk and operational risk. So don't go to an insurance company if you got these issues and say you're going to take me out. And I'll give you a good example about market risk. A few years ago, would be within the last 10 years, but I can't be more specific than that. Procter & Gamble, which as many of you know is a Cincinnati company, is a Fortune 500 company's stock declined precipitously. Now, precipitously is for people who own Procter & Gamble stock. It didn't go down like a lead balloon. And so a number of people who had their retirement earnings severely impacted by the loss of the value of the stock sued the company and said, hey, you guys didn't do a very good job, and we lost money, and our retirement incomes have gone down, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I won't say that the suit didn't have merit, but it didn't see the light of day. It got to court, and of course, so wait a minute, there's no standing here. Yeah, you're stockholders, et cetera, but this is a market risk, and you can't figure this out. I mean, you can't recover income, so it's not something you're going to be able to recover. These are public types of public insurance. I should have come back to what's insurable risk. This is what they insurable interest. That's like your automobile, your home, some other piece of tangible property. And the reason I'm saying tangible property is because you may have to be able to measure the loss. The possibility of chance of loss must be measurable. It has to be loss from an accident, and the risk for the insurance company is going to be dispersed as broadly as it could possibly disperse it so that it's not holding all the risk. So we have various types of insurance. By the way, public insurance that helps people out. This is you can see this in your text, figure C1 at the bottom of page C5, and it talks about things like unemployment compensation, Social Security, national flood insurance, federal crime insurance, federal crop insurance, etc. I'm not going to go over each of those. I suggest that you look at them just so you can become familiar with them. And if you have issues, then you think about it, you're going to buy a home, or you have something that falls in this category, talk to some people who have some legal standing, can help you out to know where you are. Insurance policies, that's a contract. It's a contract between the company, the insurance company, and the policyholder, you or me. And the insurance company is promising you that for consideration of payment of premium, it is going to pay a certain amount on a potential loss to you. Now, it could pay all of it, could be part of it, et cetera, et cetera. So we talked about premium, and the claim is we're going back to the insurance company and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Insurance Company, I have a homeowner's policy with you, and I've had some damage to my home, and here's the damage, and here it was caused accidental, and please pay this amount. How insurance works is it works on a thing of known as the law of large numbers. So what the insurance company is trying to do is to sell as many policies as it can in a certain category to as many people as it possibly can to move the risk out, to broaden the risk so that it's not being caught with a whole bunch of risk at one time that it has to pay out from damage, etc. Now, the rule of indemnity says you can't collect more than the actual loss, period. Two types of insurance companies: a stock company, and notice that this is like any publicly traded company that sells stock. It's owned by the stockholders. A mutual company, on the other hand, is owned by the policyholders. Which is better than the other? I can't tell you. I don't know. You really need to do a little investigation on your own to determine if one is better for you than another. This tells you stock companies, Hartford Life, Metropolitan, Prudential versus mutuals, Mass Mutual, New York Life, and Northwestern Mutual. Now we have things like the Affordable Care Act, which I'm not going to talk a lot about to you, but it has helped a number of people. A lot of people complain that there's a lot of bugs in it. Probably are, but what it has done, it has moved a number of people in the United States off of being uninsured. What difference does that make to us? What difference it should make to us is that we're not paying a bill that we shouldn't have to pay. Now, are we paying that bill directly? No, we're not paying that bill directly, but you do pay the bill when insurance rates go up. And that's been one of the issues we've been grappling with in the United States for a long period of time. Affordable Care Act has put a damper on some of the rise of health insurance rates, but as far as I'm concerned, not enough. And that's personal, and I'm not here to defend the act or tear it apart. But what I am here to say is that we really don't have a good answer to why these insurance bills continue to rise. It's something we need to grapple with. It's something we need to get our elected representatives to sit down and talk about and stop paying attention to lobbyists. What's best for the American people, not what's best for a particular business. There are other types of insurance, disability insurance that you can buy, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. You have to make up your mind. It's not something that I can answer for you. Some people have it, some people don't. Workers' compensation is something you don't pay into, it takes care of the things that it needs to take care of for your medical care and rehabilitation and things of that nature. That's something that employers pay into, and of course employers really try to keep that cost down, and the way they try to keep the cost down is to have employees be in health and wellness programs and promote safety in the workplace and things of that nature. You'd be surprised to find out that there are more people injured in administrative offices, when I'm talking about not a lot of machinery or equipment around on an everyday basis, than there are in other areas. Here's just some ways to get the most out of life insurance. Don't smoke. If you do smoke, stop smoking. If you don't smoke, continue to not smoke. Keep your weight down. Exercise. Find out how much insurance you really need and don't buy any more than what you need. Make sure you find a good insurance company and then find a good financial manager. You can buy a liability insurance if you think you're going to need it. Some professions, like medical professions, do. Some lawyers do, and things of that nature. Then there's also product liability insurance. That's something that companies are going to buy. Home-based businesses, if you have one, make sure that your homeowner's insurance covers it. Not all of them do. Well, covers that business part, and check it out. If it doesn't, then you can get a rider that will add to your insurance policy to cover that particular part of it. And then, of course, home matters. We're going to talk a little bit about this before. Don't buy more coverage than what you need. We've spoken about that. Watch the small claims because they can add up, and the insurance company may want to have you do more insurance than what you want to do. And then look at your home's history, its age, and a few other things to do the things that you need to do to keep your insurance at a reasonable amount. Well, that brings us to the end of risk management. We're going to take a break now till 5:33. It's 5:30 now, and we'll come back and talk about managing personal finances. Please come back 5:33. Thank you. All right, 5:33, bonus chapter D, our last one for the course, managing personal finances. And let's look at our learning objectives. Outline the 6 steps for controlling your assets. Explain how to build a financial base, including investing in real estate, saving money, and managing credit. Explain how buying the appropriate insurance can protect your financial base. And finally, outline a strategy for retiring with enough money to last a lifetime. Hopefully, we can all do that. These are the 6 steps to control your finances. And I'm not going to try to read each one of these to you. You can see them for yourself. They are also listed in your text on pages D3 and D4 and D5 and part of D6. But there are some things that I think are very important besides finding out what your assets are. You have to know how much is coming in and how much is going out. You cannot do anything other than that. Now, I remember years ago when I was in the Army, and we would counsel young soldiers because they were going past their budget. They'd say, we'd say, you can't spend all this. And then they'd say, well, You know, I'm only paying $50 a month on a TV, and I'm only paying $100 a month on my car. I said, well, you have to figure all those out. You have to come up with a sum total, and the sum total can't be more than what you're bringing in, because if you do, you're going to have problems. Prepare a budget. Now, a lot of people don't like to do that. And what I say is prepare a budget and use it as a guideline. Does it mean you always have to stay within your budget? No, it doesn't. As long as when you go outside your budget, you don't break it. So, you know, you can give yourself a few luxuries, etc., as long as you're trying to stay within that budget. And as long as you manage that budget correctly, it's okay. Notice the last couple ones, very important. Pay off your debts. If you have a credit card debt, do everything in your power to eliminate it. I'm not disparaging anybody that has a credit card debt. What I'm saying to you is that the amount of interest that you pay on a monthly basis is really very exorbitant if you stop and look at it. If you're paying 18% a month, and I'm only using that as a category, let's use 20. That's an easier figure to calculate. You're paying 240% interest a year if you don't pay off the debt. If you only pay the minimum due each month, you're going to pay an accumulative 240% interest. That's exorbitant. So if you have a credit card, remember what you do when you use a credit card. You're borrowing money. You're taking out a loan, and you have to pay that loan back with interest unless you pay it off on time. And, you know, get in plans where you can pay that off on time, not off on time, and you can pay it off every month. Now, there may come a day when a credit card company says, we don't want your business anymore because you're paying that off. I'm not using myself as a paragon of virtue here, but my wife and I pay off our credit card bills every month, totally. And all the credit cards, I'm not going to talk about American Express, I'll talk about it in a second. All the credit cards that I have, you know, are with either Visa or MasterCard. And so if I'm paying off my debt every month, how is it that they've never come and charged me anything? Well, it's because there are other people who are not paying off their debt and they're making enough money on them that they can do that. But don't get into that category. Pay off your debt. Now, American Express, I have to pay a fee every year to belong to American Express. But American Express gives me some benefits that I don't get with the other credit card companies. And I've had American Express card for a number of years. And I like it, but I don't overuse it. And then start a savings plan of some kind, even if it's minimal, and be dedicated to save every month a certain amount. And then finally, only borrow money to buy assets. So you only borrow money like to buy a house, or you borrow money to buy a car. Now, a car is not really an asset because it depreciates pretty quickly in value. It's like a house. Most houses hold them for a period of years that go up in value over time, not necessarily tomorrow or the next week. But a car does say that you have some kind of an asset there. You can sell the car and get money from it. Maybe not as much as you want, but you can still get that back. So those are the things you really need to think about in being able to control your own finances. Remember another thing. Nobody else is going to control your finances but you. And so you have to make the plan. You have to live with the plan. And don't make it too onerous on yourself. Give yourself some wiggle room. This household budget. You are probably going to spend 30% of your income, of your after-tax income, on either mortgage or rent. And then you have food and clothing and vehicles and furniture and insurance and other types of needs. And those are all things, go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Those fall into the first two categories, physiological needs and safety needs. So you have to have those. And so that's something you have to think about. What is it that I have to spend my money on? first, and then what do I do with the rest of it? Now, this gives you some ways to save money. I don't like that first one about Starbucks. I don't no longer drink coffee, but you know, I don't know that I would, if I still did drink coffee, if I would trade Starbucks, if I like Starbucks real well, for something I could buy at a gasoline station. Now, some people tell me that places like, I can't think of the gasoline station, it's a big concern, that their coffee's pretty good. Well, if it is, fine. And if you can get the same type of quality of coffee and spend less money for it, that's what you ought to do. So, you know, it's like bottled water, etc. Now, this is a annual rate of return of money. Unfortunately, none of us are even getting as little as 2% on our bank accounts today. I have a cousin that I have a power of attorney for, and she has a significant amount of money. She's over 90. Has a significant amount of money in a CD, and she gets 0.15% interest. I only mention that because her statement came the other day, and it's flabbergasted me every time I see it. And to make matters worse, it's a building and loan association where her dad was president for a number of years. How else do we want to cut back, you know, cut down on gourmets and think about your cell phone bill, and you could cut out cable TV if you wanted to do that, and a few other things. And I'm not going to suggest that you do any of those things. What I'm going to suggest is that you think about these things that you want to do and look for a less expensive alternative. What is it I can do that's going to cost me less money and I'll still get some enjoyment out of it? And you know, it's just being frugal. It's not being cheap. It's just watching where your money goes and how you spend your money, and trying to spend it wisely. This is just going on here. How live frugally. I just used that word. If both of you work, you and your spouse work, try to live on one salary. Make an investment in a starter home or fixer-up home, and buy it so you can make money out of it and sell it and move on. Now, most people will tell you if you want to make money out of a house, you have to own it a minimum of 3 years. So think about that. Here are some other rules about frugality. Don't give up something you love. Look for something that's less expensive. You know, you're not going to spend as much money on your on what you're doing for entertainment dollar. Look for deals. With the internet today, you can look for deals without wearing out shoe leather or gasoline in your car. These are things that you should look at when you buy a house. It's something you can live on. It's an investment you can live in. You're actually paying yourself in a way. The interest rate that you pay is tax deductible. And how do you want to find a home? 3 words at the bottom of that slide: location, location, location. You want to look for something in some good school district and things of that nature, something that has curb appeal. How much a home can you afford? This gives you an idea of this particular slide. And you can see this graphically displayed in your text, figure D3 at the top of page D9. I'm not going to go into that, but it's something that's you might want to look at. If you're into you know, managing your credit, look for what's known as a contrarian approach. You might want to think about you buy stock when other people are selling, or vice versa. Credit cards are great. Use them wisely. We spoke about that before. I'm not going to beat that to death. There's credit cards in debt. If you don't think credit card's a good idea, use a debit card. Or what's the idea of the debit card? Well, the debit card is when you use the debit card, that money's automatically taken out of your account. So it's not a loan. You have to have the money there to pay it, and you won't be paying interest on that. I'm not going to go into this Credit Card Act of 2009, but you have to watch the rates, and it tells you how much money you're liable for if your card's stolen. Have good credit. That's the first one. Pay your bills on time. Don't shift balances around. You get that all the time. Shift your balance here. Be careful about that. Don't file for too many credit cards. Try to keep them to a minimum, and then obviously don't file bankruptcy. I mean, that's something that's not going to help you at all. Here's the range on your credit score, and you can get a free credit score each year. Something that you should do, and something that will help you understand where you stand with credit. Didn't mean to use two stands at once, but something you can do. Insurance, something you probably want to do, but remember, if you buy insurance, you're not going to live to use it unless you buy something like variable life insurance down here at the bottom. You're buying life insurance for those that you care about. Now, two ways to buy it. Whole life insurance gives you an amount of insurance, and there's some kind of a savings that goes along with that. So you pay in for a certain number of years. Let's say the insurance policy is worth $20,000, and you pay in for I don't know how many years it is. But when you get to the end of payment, you start taking that out. If you decide you want to, the policy could be worth more than $20,000 to get to you. Term insurance, on the other hand, is a good idea for young people because it allows you to buy a fair amount of insurance for relatively low cost. And the younger you are, the less it costs you, just as the slide says. So many times it benefits a young person to buy term insurance for his or her family, and then continue to pay that, and then perhaps after 20 or 25 years, most terms don't go over 20, I don't think. The family be grown, and you won't have to worry about it. You can think about doing something else with your money. I'm not suggesting that you do that, but I am suggesting that's an alternative. It's something that you may want to look at. What I would say to you is, again, don't buy more insurance than what you need. An annuity, it's a type of life insurance that is going to pay you some money when you want it, when you're ready to retire. And you can either fixed period or for your life. Two types of annuities, fixed and variable. If you're going to buy one of these type of instruments, get some advice from a financial planner, not necessarily insurance agent, unless you know the insurance agent very well, to make sure that you're buying the right amount of insurance, and it's going to give you back what you want to get back. Disability insurance, we talked about that before. It's something you can buy. It doesn't, not something that comes along. Some insurance policies allow you to put a disability rider on there, and it'll pay you a certain amount of money if you're incapacitated for some reason. Homeowners insurance, we talked about that in the last segment. We don't have to bring it up again, but this is just watching your risk. An umbrella policy is exactly what it says. Some insurance companies allow you to put life, car, homeowners insurance into one policy, and that's less costly. Something you may want to investigate, and again, talk to someone that can give you some kind of good idea about. This is talking about where your dollar goes for health care. I'm not going to talk about that. There are things known as health savings accounts. Mostly those are set up by your employer. talk to your employer, and get the right person to talk to you so you understand what's good for you. Most of these are, you pay these with pre-tax dollars. So in other words, if you make $1,000 a month and you're going to pay $100 into this health savings account, that $100 comes off before you're taxed. So you're only taxed on $900. So there's a benefit for you to do that. Remember, they're not for everybody, and something you really need to get help with before you buy something like this, because it's to your benefit. Social Security, old age and survivors disability programs started in 1935. We've been paying into it for a long period of time. Most of us in the workforce, if you're old enough, and there's an income. We know that there are more people getting money out of Social Security than there are paying into Social Security, and it's not as unstable as people would have you believe. It's probably not as stable as other people would have you believe. This is a thing that Congress has continually kicked this can down the alley. Congress needs to decide what to do and to stop fooling around. Will we wind up paying more? Perhaps. But we don't want to take away something that has been told to us that's guaranteed. But on the other hand, maybe we ought to have people paying more than what to do. Right now, it's capped at $104,000. So if I made $104,000 a year, or you made $104,000 a year, you wouldn't pay any more into it than a person who makes, percentage-wise, than a person who makes $50,000 a year. So now, if you made $120,000 or $130,000 or $150,000 or even more than that, should you be paying more in Social Security? Many people think you should. Of course, there's a lot of people saying, "Well, why should I pay more?" Well, we have to think about what we're after, and we have to come to grips with that instead of arguing at each other. We need to talk to each other, come up with a plan that is good for everybody. Individual retirement accounts, IRAs, you can get those for usually with your company. These are tax deferred contributions. In other words, what that means is you don't pay any tax on it until you take it out. Now there's another type of IRA that you can get, which is called a Roth IRA, which we're going to come to next, but I'm going to talk about it right now. And what that says, you put money into it and you don't get taxed anytime. So you know, when you start taking that money out, there's no tax. Now, of course, if you put it into a savings instrument, you're going to get paid on taxed on that, but you're not going to get paid on IRA. And then here's this MyIRA, which is a new type of Roth savings plan for low and middle income people. 401k plans are sponsored by employers. What I say to you is, many employers will say, you know, put your money into our stock, etc. And that can be good. But what I do say to you is, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Make sure that you diversify whatever it is that you save. Here's the benefits. You pay into an IRA, that tax, you're not taxed on those, as I said, until you take the money out. And if well, I shouldn't say most, I stay with what the slide says. Many employers will match up to a certain dollar amount. A Kehoe plan is like an IRA, but it's for self-employed people, and they do the same thing, get the same type of benefits, except you don't have an employer match. And then finally, if you're going to have some money that you want other people to inherit, do some estate planning. You need to have a lawyer help you with that, or a tax accountant, so it's set up. And then, of course, there's a will, and then there's an executor, and that person is the person who's empowered to take care of your assets and then to distribute them as specified in the will. Well, that takes us to the end of the bonus chapters A, C, and D. There is no lecture discussion question for this week. Please remember that all your assignments have to be submitted either through Campus Web or to me by 11:50 Eastern Time this Sunday, October 23rd. Thank you for your attention. I'll have this uploaded tomorrow. Good night and good luck with the rest of your courses. Thank you.